If you've been second guessing yourself, going back and forth, feeling clear one moment and uncertain the next, it's very easy to start drawing conclusions about what that means. That something isn't stable, that your judgment shifts too easily, that you can't rely on what you notice. But what you've been experiencing isn't inconsistency in the way you think. It's what happens when complexity is present and there's no structure to hold it. If you slow the experience down, there are a few things happening at once. You're not working with a single stream of information. There are multiple inputs moving at the same time. Some register quickly, some take a moment to form, some are quiet, some are more immediate. They don't always align with each other, and they don't organize themselves. So instead of one clear direction, you get layers. You might notice something clearly at first, a reaction in your body, a sense of direction, a recognition that something fits or doesn't. At that point, the experience is simple. There isn't much interpretation attached to it. Then other layers begin to form. Your mind starts working with it. You begin thinking through what makes sense. You become aware of how this might affect someone else. You consider consequences. You review it from different angles. Nothing in that process is wrong. But as those layers build, the original perception becomes less central. It's still there. It just isn't the only thing in view anymore. You're not inconsistent. You're working with multiple inputs without a way to organize them. From the inside, this doesn't feel like a structural issue. It feels like something about you is shifting. You feel clear, and then you don't. You notice something, and then you question it. You decide, and then you revisit. That pattern repeats often enough that it starts to feel like a personal trait, like you can't hold a position, like your clarity doesn't last. And that interpretation tends to settle in quietly. It shows up as small decisions, deferring a choice, double-checking something you already considered, looking for reassurance before you move forward. Over time, it shapes how you see yourself. More cautious, less certain, someone who needs more time to arrive at a decision. But what's actually happening in those moments isn't hesitation in the way you think. It's that you're working with more than one layer of information and treating all of it as if it requires the same kind of response. But the instability is coming from how many things are being processed at once and how those things are being interpreted in relation to each other. When different types of input are treated as if they're the same thing, they start to conflict. That conflict creates pressure, not dramatically, more like a constant internal tension, a sense that something hasn't resolved, that there are multiple directions still open. And that's difficult to sit with. So your internal system looks for resolution, something that settles the experience, something that allows you to move forward. That's where the override begins. You shift towards what feels more stable, what's easier to explain, what leads to a decision you can stand behind. And once that happens, the earlier perception drops out of focus. When you look back later, it can seem like your initial read was wrong or that it changed. But if you look more closely, something else becomes visible. The initial perception was there. It was clear in its own way. It just wasn't what shaped the final decision. You might look at a situation and say, I changed my mind. But if you trace the sequence, it often looks different. There was a first response. Then there were additional considerations. Then a shift towards something that felt more stable. And the decision came from that later layer. So the outcome looks inconsistent. The sequence itself is not. Nothing is wrong with your intuition. What's missing is a way to work with what you're receiving. When there's a way to recognize what's coming in and to separate one kind of input from another, the experience starts to shift. The same inputs are still there. The same complexity is still present, but there's more space between them. You can see what arrives first. You can see what gets added after. You're no longer trying to make everything agree. And that changes how decisions get made. At a certain point, this stops being conceptual. It becomes something you're working with in real time, in conversations and decisions that matter, in situations where multiple things are happening at once. That's where precision becomes important. Not just noticing, but knowing what you're noticing and how to stay with it long enough for it to be useful. But before any of that, there's something much simpler to see. What you've been experiencing makes sense. The back and forth, the second guessing, the feeling of losing clarity, those aren't signs that something is missing. They're signs that multiple things are present and they haven't been separated yet. If you haven't taken the quiz yet, that's the best place to start. It'll show you how your intuition tends to come through first, what else tends to show up around it, and why certain situations feel more complicated than others. From there, you can start to recognize the structure of your own experience. Once there's a way to see what's happening, the experience itself becomes steadier. Not simpler, but clearer.